Well, hello there. I wanted to do today a quick review or a recommendation for this book, The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Now, I read this years and years and years ago when I was in a novels class in the 7th grade. We had a teacher named Mrs. Griffiths. So, Mrs. Griffiths, if you're watching, which I doubt that you are, I want to just say thank you. I was a real horrible student, and I apologize because you were a really cool lady, and I was very disruptive to your class. So, you tried to recommend some good literature to us, and this was definitely a good book. I was just too much of a 14-year-old, jerk to really appreciate it for what it was. But I've read this book several times since then. This is a classic, man. If you've never read this, you need to read this book. I think a lot of people would find this kind of off-putting. Obviously, we've explored Mars at this point. We know that there's no life on Mars. We know that Mars is basically a barren desert wasteland. But back when Ray Bradbury wrote this, I think probably they already knew that Mars was unpopulated, but this was really a good science fiction novel. If you've ever watched, if you're a fan of let me just stop. If you're a fan of the Twilight Zone, if you like Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, and if you like classic Star Trek, this very much has the feel of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone or classic Trek. You have this exploration and colonization of Mars, which is told through a series of short stories. So what this book is it's a collection of short stories that tell an overarching narrative. You have basically several what you would call away missions of different groups of astronauts that arrive and land on Mars, and they have some encounters with the Martians that really don't go so well. So they have like these Twilight Zone-like endings. You have things in this book like telepathy. So if you think of the pilot episode of Star Trek from the 1960s called The Cage, where they encountered the Telosians, this very much is what the Martians are like in this book. They psychically project into other people's minds. And many of the stories in here have been adapted into radio programs. For instance, the old radio show Dimension X has converted several of these short stories into episodes. And the old Ray Bradbury Theater from the 1980s, which I think originally appeared on Home Box Office, has adapted a couple of these stories. Mars is Heaven being one of them. Now, the story itself maybe is off-putting to modern audiences because it is so old. But I don't think that having stories that were written in the 1950s, 40s, and 50s, if you're open to it, these are really, really good science fiction stories. Even though they are what you would call dated by modern standards, they're just a lot of fun. This is a reflection of humanity. And I can't recommend it highly enough. I really enjoy this. I've revisited this novel on several occasions. And it's really short. So this is like the perfect kind of novel to read at night before you go to bed, because each one of the stories in here, they're short stories. They don't typically run longer than 18 or 19 pages on a whole. As you can see, the chronology of the story, it starts in January 1999, okay, and it ends in October of 2026 with the Million Year Picnic. Now, this is a product of the Cold War, so it does have things in there like nuclear annihilation, the threat of it. But man, I really like this. This book is fantastic. I'm going to read to you chapter 1, which is January 1999, titled Rocket Summer, so you can kind of get a taste for Bradbury's prose. It's very poetic, and he has a great use of language. So here we go. 1 minute it was Ohio winter, with doors closed, windows locked, the panes blind with frost, icicles fringing every roof, children skiing on slopes, housewives lumbering like great black bears in their furs along the icy streets. And then a long wave of warmth crossed the small town, a flooding sea of hot air. It seemed as if someone had left a bakery door open. The heat pulsed among the cottages and bushes and children. The icicles dropped, shattering, to melt. The doors flew open. The windows flew up. The children worked off their wool clothes. The housewives shed their bare disguises. The snow dissolved and showed last summer's ancient green lawns. Rocket summer. The words passed among the people in the open, airing houses. Rocket summer. The warm desert air changing the frost patterns on the windows, erasing the artwork. The skis and sleds suddenly useless. The snow, falling from the cold sky upon the town, turned to a hot rain before it touched the ground. Rocket summer. People leaned from their dripping porches and watched the reddening sky. The rocket lay on the launching field, blowing out pink clouds of fire and oven heat. The rocket stood in the cold winter morning, making summer with every breath of its mighty exhaust. The rocket made climates, and summer lay for a brief moment upon the land. Ray Bradbury is a master of prose, and I absolutely love him. He's one of my favorite authors, and this is probably my favorite Bradbury book. I haven't read too many of them. Shame on me. I really need to read some more. So this is the first of a Ray Bradbury review series. If you've never read this book, do yourself a favor. Check it out. Man, this is a good one. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. Again, if you like Rod Serling's classic television series, The Twilight Zone, you like classic Star Trek, this is going to be right up your alley. It's a fantastic book. Now, they did do an adaptation of this into a television miniseries back in the 1970s, which starred Rock Hudson, and people like Roddy McDowall. It was kind of a mixed bag. You could probably find that streaming for free on YouTube somewhere. The quality is not too great, but I liked it as a television adaptation. Maybe I'll revisit it. I haven't seen it in probably 25, 30 years. But that's going to conclude my review for this. Thank you for watching. You can get this one relatively cheap. I think you can pick this book up for like $10. Do yourself a favor and get it. It's not real long. It's only, 241 pages. And like I said, if it's a collection of short stories, so if you don't like one of them, chances are you'll like the next one. It's really good. I can't recommend it highly enough. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. God bless.